There's something most men never figure out, not because they're not paying attention, not because they don't care, but because they're looking in the wrong places, waiting for the obvious signs, waiting for the message that says, I miss you, waiting for the call that admits everything, waiting for words. But here's the truth that Stoicism has known for thousands of years. The most powerful emotions are rarely spoken out loud. Think about Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic emperors who ever lived. He wrote in his private journal, Meditations, not to the world, but to himself. Why? Because the deepest feelings, the truest reflections, don't come out in declarations. They come out in behavior, in quiet moments, in the small, almost invisible choices people make when they think no one is watching. Women are no different. And here's what I want you to really understand before we go any further. This video is not about teaching you how to play games. It's not about manipulation. It's not about making someone chase you for ego. This is about emotional intelligence. This is about understanding human nature at its deepest level so that you can stop chasing confusion and start reading reality for what it actually is. Because here's the uncomfortable truth most men need to hear. If you've been waiting for a woman to tell you directly that she misses you, you may have already missed every signal she was sending. Today, we're going to change that. We're going to break down 3 silent signals women send when they secretly miss someone, the psychology behind each one, real life examples you'll immediately recognize, and what Stoic philosophy teaches us about how to respond with dignity, self-respect, and quiet confidence. Stay until the end because signal number 3 is the one most men not only miss, they actually misread it entirely, and it costs them everything. Let's begin. Before we get into the signals, we need to understand why they're silent in the first place. Imagine a woman, let's call her Maya. She and a man she deeply connected with have drifted apart. Maybe the relationship ended, maybe he pulled back, maybe distance just crept in. Every few days, she picks up her phone, starts typing a message, and deletes it. She scrolls back through old photos. She laughs at something, then remembers he would have found it funny too. She goes to sleep thinking about something he once said. But she doesn't reach out, not directly, not openly. Why? Because vulnerability is terrifying. Admitting I miss you feels like handing someone a weapon. And if they don't respond the way you hoped, the wound cuts twice as deep. There's also pride, social conditioning, fear of rejection, fear of appearing needy or desperate, fear of being seen as the one who cared more. Psychologists call this emotional self-protection. And it doesn't mean the feeling isn't real. It means the feeling is so real that she can't risk exposing it fully. And so instead of speaking it, she does it in small ways, in almost invisible ways, in ways that, if you know what to look for, speak louder than any text message ever could. This is exactly what the Stoics understood about human nature. Epictetus, a man born into slavery who became one of the greatest minds in history, taught that what people want and what people say are often completely different things. And wisdom lies in learning to read the difference. Now, I want to say something important because there's a massive misconception about Stoicism that I need to address. The Stoics were not cold, emotionless robots. Marcus Aurelius loved his wife deeply. Seneca wrote beautifully about grief and connection. Epictetus spoke tenderly about friendship and loyalty. What the Stoics actually taught was this: understand your emotions, don't be ruled by them. And when it comes to attachment, the Stoic view is remarkably clear. Seneca wrote, "He who is everywhere is nowhere." What he meant is this: constant presence dilutes value. When you are always available, always reachable, always present, you become background noise. You become assumed. You become taken for granted. But the moment that presence is removed, that's when the weight of it is felt. Think of it like this: you don't notice the air conditioning until it stops working on a hot day. You don't appreciate silence until there's noise. You don't appreciate water until you're thirsty. Humans, by nature, take for granted what is consistently available and feel the loss of what has been removed. This is not cruelty. This is not manipulation. This is simply human nature. And the Stoics were honest enough to name it. So when a man steps back, focuses on his own growth, and stops orbiting around a woman, something shifts. Not because he's playing games, but because absence creates space. And in that space, real feelings surface. Now, here's what those feelings look like. The first silent signal is this: she creates reasons to reach out, reasons that seem small, logical, or casual. But the timing is never random. A man named Daniel had been seeing a woman for several months. Things didn't work out. He decided to focus on himself, stopped initiating, started going to the gym, picked up a new project, genuinely invested in his own life. 3 weeks pass. Then, out of nowhere, she texts him, "Hey, I think I still have your hoodie." Just a hoodie, simple enough, except she's had that hoodie for months. She knew exactly where it was. Why now? Or take another example: a man named James and a woman he used to talk to every day. He pulled back. 2 weeks later, she sends him a meme, something funny, casual, no pressure. But it was the kind of inside joke that only made sense between them, something no one else would have understood. She was reaching into their shared history. She was creating a bridge. These aren't coincidences. These are invitations wrapped in everyday packaging. She might tag you in something on social media she thought you'd find funny. She might reply to your story after weeks of silence. She might text you something completely mundane. "Did you ever try that restaurant you mentioned?" As if she's just been casually wondering. But she wasn't casually wondering. She's been thinking about you. And this is how that thought finally found an exit. The psychology here is called low risk testing. She wants to know if the door is still open without fully knocking on it. She wants to feel the temperature without stepping inside. If you respond warmly, she edges closer. If you're cold or dismissive, she retreats. But she was there. She reached out. She found the reason because she needed to find it. So, what does the Stoic man do? He responds calmly, warmly, without overeagerness. He doesn't immediately ask, "So does this mean something?" He doesn't flood her with attention. He simply responds like a man who is grounded, who has been living well, and who is genuinely glad to hear from her, but doesn't need her. That calm, secure energy, it's magnetic. It's what makes her edge closer still. There's something curious that happens when someone misses you. They become unusually interested in what you're doing, not in an obvious asking questions way, in a watching way, a researching way, a quietly tracking your life from a distance way. A woman named Sophia had ended things with a man she cared about. She told herself she was fine. She told her friends she was over it. But every few days, she found herself opening his Instagram, watching his stories without saying a word, noticing when he posted, noticing when he didn't post, wondering what was keeping him busy, wondering if he was happy, wondering if he was thinking about her at all. She never reached out, but the curiosity was undeniable. This is signal one in its quietest form, not the text message, but the silent observation, the digital footprint she leaves without meaning to, the viewed story, the late night profile visit, the active now status she checks before she goes to sleep. These aren't actions of someone who has moved on. These are actions of someone who is still emotionally tethered, still thinking, still wondering, still caring, but not yet ready to say so. Here's something that counteracts everything modern dating culture tells you. Modern culture says, be present, be available, never let her forget you, constantly reach out, double text, make sure she knows you're thinking about her, stay in her orbit. But what does psychology actually show? Study after study in behavioral psychology confirms that perceived scarcity increases perceived value. When something becomes less available, we instinctively want it more. This isn't just about dating, it's about everything. Limited edition products sell out. Restaurants with wait lists seem more desirable. The friend who's always busy feels more interesting than the one who always has time. When a man is constantly, relentlessly available, always texting back in seconds, always making himself accessible, he removes the opportunity for longing to develop. There is nothing to miss because he is always there. But when a man becomes genuinely absorbed in his own life, when he has goals, discipline, a sense of purpose that doesn't revolve around her, his presence shifts. He becomes someone who could be missed, and then he is. This isn't a trick. This isn't a technique. This is just what happens when a man builds a life worth living, one that naturally creates the kind of absence that makes feelings rise to the surface. The second silent signal is more subtle than the first and far more common than most men realize. She watches, she observes, she tracks your life from a careful, quiet distance, and she says absolutely nothing. A man, let's call him Marcus, went through a difficult breakup. He didn't spiral, he didn't beg. He started waking up early, going for runs, reading again, building the business he'd put on hold. He posted occasionally, not to make anyone jealous, just because he was genuinely living. A month passed, then two. One evening, a mutual friend mentioned to him, "She asks about you, you know. She always wants to know how you're doing." She hadn't texted him once, but she was asking about him, watching his life unfold, curious, invested, but not yet ready to admit it to him. This is signal two in its most common form. She views your stories but doesn't respond. She likes a photo from a week ago, not the most recent one, but one from deeper in your profile, which tells you she's been going back and looking. She might react to something with a simple emoji, not a message, just a quiet acknowledgement that says, "I see you. I notice you." The psychology behind this is called approach avoidance conflict. She wants to reach out. She's drawn toward connection, but she's also afraid of rejection, afraid of looking weak, afraid of opening a door that might not open back. So she hovers, she circles, she watches and waits. And what does the Stoic man do? He doesn't chase it. He doesn't send a message saying, "I saw you viewed my story." He doesn't post things specifically designed to make her react. He simply continues living well and lets the watching do its work. Because a man who lives a rich, purposeful life is naturally compelling. She'll eventually reach out, or she won't. Either way, he's fine. There's a universal truth about human beings that no amount of social media, modern dating advice, or cultural change has managed to alter. We don't fully understand the value of something until we feel its absence. This isn't weakness. This isn't a flaw. This is how we're built. A child doesn't appreciate a parent's constant presence until the parent isn't there. An employee doesn't appreciate job security until the layoffs begin. A person doesn't appreciate good health until they lose it. And a woman doesn't always appreciate a good man's presence until that presence is gone. This is not about punishing anyone. It's not about withholding love to teach lessons. It's about understanding that clarity comes through contrast. When things are constant, they fade into the background. When something is removed, its shape becomes visible. The Stoics called this memento mori, the practice of contemplating loss, not to create sadness, but to cultivate genuine appreciation. When you truly understand that something won't always be there, you value it differently. She is living this in real time without meaning to, and it's producing feelings she's not sure what to do with. Here's something that might surprise you. Silence, real, sustained silence from a man who has genuinely stepped back, doesn't produce indifference in a woman who still has feelings. It produces reflection. In the constant noise of modern communication, texts, social media, notifications, people rarely stop to ask themselves what they actually feel. They're too busy reacting, too busy performing, too busy in the constant current of input and output. But silence creates stillness. And in stillness, she has no choice but to confront what's actually there. She might lie in bed at night and find herself replaying a conversation. She might hear a song and feel something unexpected. She might be out with friends laughing, and then in the middle of that laughter, feel a quiet, hollow space that she recognizes as missing someone. This is the productive silence the Stoics spoke of. Not silence as punishment, not silence as a strategy, but the natural silence that comes from a man who has turned his focus inward to his own development, his own peace, his own purpose. And that silence, paradoxically, speaks more loudly than 100 text messages. Now we come to the third signal, and I need you to pay close attention here because this is the one most men not only miss, they actually misread it completely. Her behavior becomes inconsistent. Sometimes warm, sometimes cold, sometimes reaching out, sometimes pulling back, sometimes affectionate, sometimes distant. And most men see this and think, she's playing games. She doesn't know what she wants. She's stringing me along. But here's what's actually happening. Her emotional state is in conflict. Part of her wants to close the distance, to reconnect, to be close again, to stop pretending she doesn't care. But another part of her is scared, scared of being vulnerable, scared of being rejected again, scared of what it means to admit that she still has feelings. And when internal conflict is unresolved, it expresses itself as inconsistency, as mixed signals, as emotional push and pull. Let me give you a real example. A woman named Layla and a man named Ethan had stopped talking after a falling out. Then one day, Layla texted him something warm and nostalgic. They talked for hours. It felt like before. Then, 2 days later, silence. She didn't reply to his message. She posted something on her story that suggested she was completely unbothered. He was confused, hurt, thought she was playing games. But Layla wasn't playing games. Layla had felt something during that conversation that frightened her. She'd gotten close and then panicked and retreated. The warmth was real. The retreat was fear. Both things were true at the same time. This is what inconsistency looks like when someone secretly misses you. It isn't cruelty. It's the emotional equivalent of approaching a flame, reaching out for warmth, then pulling back before getting burned. So, what does the Stoic man do? He doesn't react to each wave. He doesn't get pulled high when she's warm and crushed low when she's cold. He maintains his center. He is steady, grounded, and consistent, not because he doesn't feel anything, but because he understands that reacting to every fluctuation is exhausting, undignified, and ultimately unattractive. His consistency in the face of her inconsistency is itself a signal. One that says, I know who I am, I'm not going anywhere, and I'm not desperate for your validation. That energy, that's the most magnetic thing a man can project. Now, here's something critical I want to address because confusing these two things is a real danger. Not every woman who goes quiet has secretly missed you. Not every silence is loaded with hidden feelings. Some silences are exactly what they appear to be, someone who has found peace in moving forward. So, how do you tell the difference? The signals we've described, finding small reasons to reappear, watching without reaching out, and displaying inconsistent behavior, are active signals. They indicate engagement, even if it's quiet. She is still doing something that connects her to you. Moving on looks different. Moving on is genuine absence. No story views, no reaching out, no mutual friends passing along questions about how you're doing, no midnight replies that take 3 hours to arrive. Just quiet, clean, complete. If a woman has genuinely moved on, honor that. The Stoic path is not to chase what has ended. It is to accept reality clearly and build your own life with full commitment. But if you're seeing these signals, if there's still engagement, however subtle, then what you're looking at is someone who hasn't let go, even though they haven't yet found the courage to say so. And this brings us to perhaps the most important thing I can tell you. Self respect is not the consolation prize when things don't work out. It is the foundation on which everything worthwhile is built. When a man chases a woman who is pulling back, texts repeatedly with no response, seeks validation, makes himself constantly available, hoping she'll eventually reciprocate, something happens. Not just to her perception of him, to his perception of himself. He begins to shrink. He begins to outsource his emotional state to someone else's responses. He becomes less of who he was, and ironically, less of the person she was ever drawn to. The Stoic path asks the harder question: who are you becoming in the absence of her validation? Are you a man who continues to build, to grow, to show up fully for his own life, regardless of whether she's watching? Or are you a man whose entire emotional ecosystem depends on whether she replies? Because here's the truth: the version of you that doesn't need her approval, that has genuine peace within himself, that lives with purpose and dignity, that version of you is the one that she's actually thinking about. That's the version she quietly misses. Not the version who sent 11 texts waiting for a reply. Be the man you were when she first noticed you. Better, even. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This is the ultimate Stoic lesson when it comes to attachment. You cannot control whether she misses you. You cannot control whether she reaches out. You cannot control whether the signals she's sending lead anywhere meaningful. You cannot control what she feels. But you can control this: the man you are every single day. You can control whether you wake up with purpose, whether you honor your commitments to yourself, whether you invest in your health, your mind, your relationships, your work, whether you carry yourself with quiet confidence rather than anxious neediness, whether you live in a way that makes you genuinely proud, regardless of who is or isn't watching. And here's the quiet irony of that commitment: a man who is fully invested in his own life is naturally compelling, not because he's performing, not because he's following a script, but because he radiates something real, something that is increasingly rare. He radiates self sufficiency, peace, direction. And in a world full of men who are emotionally desperate and constantly seeking external validation, that energy stands out like a lighthouse. She will notice. She may not admit it. She may send a signal instead. And now you know what those signals look like. Let me bring this home. 3 signals, 3 quiet truths. She finds small reasons to reappear because something is pulling her back and she needs a door that doesn't look like vulnerability. She watches without reaching out because curiosity about someone you miss is impossible to fully suppress. Her behavior becomes inconsistent because the conflict between what she feels and what she's afraid to admit expresses itself as push and pull. None of these guarantee a reconciliation. None of these are a promise. And frankly, none of these should change how you live your life. The Stoic truth is this: live so well that her missing you is the natural consequence of your presence, not the goal. Build a life so genuine, so purposeful, so grounded in self respect that the people who walked away occasionally wonder what they left behind. Not because you want them to wonder, but because that's just what living well looks like. The signals are there. Now you can see them. But more importantly, now you understand that the best response to them isn't to chase or to strategize or to play emotional chess. It's simply to be the man you know you're capable of being every single day. That's the Stoic way.